The nurse handed me my release papers with a polite smile. "You're good to go, Mr. Parker," she said, her voice warm but distant. "The doctor signed off early. Your recovery's ahead of schedule." I gave her a faint smile and nodded, though my chest still throbbed faintly from the surgery. 3 nights in that hospital, hooked up to machines that beeped and whirred like some kind of mechanical symphony, and not one visit from my wife, Lisa. She told me hospitals made her too anxious, that seeing me like this was just too much for her to handle. Sure. The cab ride home was quiet. My mind wandered as I stared out the window, watching the city blur past. Antiseptic smells faded into thoughts of my own bed, the comfort of familiar sheets, maybe even something Lisa had cooked, a casserole or pasta dish, something simple but warm. I imagined how peaceful it would be with just the two of us again, no distractions, no stress. Just us. But as we pulled into the driveway, something felt off. Lisa's car was there, but it was parked crooked across the driveway like she'd been in a hurry. That wasn't like her. She always parked neatly, almost obsessively so, lining up perfectly between the lines of the garage or driveway. This was sloppy. Rushed. I paid the driver, grabbed my overnight bag, and stepped inside quietly. The house was dark except for a faint light coming from upstairs. I didn't call out. I don't know why, I just had this heavy feeling in my gut, like the air itself was thick with tension. Something wasn't right. The stairs creaked under my feet as I climbed up, each step louder than I wanted it to be. The bedroom door was half open, a sliver of light spilling out into the hallway. I pushed it gently, and that's when I saw them. Lisa and some guy I didn't recognize were tangled up in our sheets. My sheets? The same ones I'd bought for us on our 5th anniversary, the ones she said were too expensive, but secretly loved because they were soft and luxurious. Their clothes were scattered across the floor, mingling with mine, my sweatshirt, my jeans, tossed aside like trash. Our wedding photo sat on the nightstand, tilted slightly, like it was watching the whole betrayal unfold. It felt surreal, like I was standing outside myself, watching this scene play out from a distance. I stood there frozen for what felt like an eternity. They didn't notice me. No yelling, no confrontation, no breakdown, just silence. My mind raced. How long had this been going on? Was this the first time? Or was I just too blind, too trusting, to see it before now? Finally, I backed away slowly, closing the door behind me. I walked out the front door, got back into the cab that hadn't even left yet, and simply said, "Drive." That moment changed everything. I wasn't just leaving the house, I was leaving Lisa. For good. The cab driver glanced at me through the rearview mirror. "Hey man, you just got home." I didn't answer. I stared out the window, jaw clenched, thoughts swirling. Lisa, our bed, a stranger, laughter, the way she used to touch me so carefree. "Just drive," I muttered. But I didn't head to the airport. Halfway there, I asked him to take me downtown instead, to my lawyer's office. Greg Thompson and I went way back. Back when I helped him troubleshoot his tech issues on weekends, he owed me plenty of favors. And right then, I needed every last one of them. 30 minutes later, I walked into his office still wearing the sweatpants and hoodie I'd left the hospital in. Greg looked up, surprised. "Weren't you supposed to stay in recovery another day?" I gave him a tired nod. "Plans changed." He motioned for me to sit down. I shut the door behind me and laid it all out in a low voice. I didn't yell, curse, or cry. I explained everything like it was a puzzle finally clicking together. Greg leaned back, hands clasped. "So you want a divorce?" "Yes," I said firmly. "But I want more than that. I want her gone, out of my life completely." I reached into my bag and pulled out a file I'd started preparing months ago, long before the hospital stay. "Here are the deeds, the bank accounts, the power of attorney Lisa never updated after we got married. Oh, and last year, I restructured the business into a trust. She has no idea." Greg flipped through the pages, eyebrows raising. "You've already moved everything?" "Everything," I said calmly. "The house, the business, the savings, all transferred. Lisa thinks she has access to it all. But she doesn't." He blinked. "She has no clue, does she?" I shook my head. "And by tonight she'll be locked out of the accounts, her credit cards frozen, and she'll need a new place to sleep." Greg let out a low whistle. "You're going to war." "No," I said, standing. "I'm already winning it." By the time the sun began to set, the house that once echoed with memories of warmth and laughter had become a cold fortress, one I no longer welcomed her in. The locksmith arrived within hours. I didn't waste time. Every lock on every door was replaced. The garage opener was reset. The home security code she'd chosen was disabled, and I flagged her as unauthorized access with the alarm company. I knew she'd try to return once the fun was over. Once she realized what she'd lost. But I wasn't waiting. I drove to our bank next. The clerk looked surprised when I handed over my ID and asked to close the joint account. Lisa had been spending freely, like it was an endless stream, but she hadn't checked it today. She would. I moved the remaining $23,000 into my private account, the one she didn't know existed. Then I signed a form to freeze any activity under her name, citing financial fraud and unauthorized access pending investigation. The manager didn't even flinch. "You're not the first," she said, sighing. "But you're one of the few who caught it in time." "Not caught," I corrected. I let her think she was winning. Next stop, our shared car. It wasn't technically in her name, though she'd always bragged about her luxury SUV. That afternoon, I had it picked up and returned to the dealership under our pre-agreed buyback clause. Just a phone call, a signature, gone. By the time Lisa and her lover, probably thinking they'd sneak back into our bed, arrived at the house, there was nothing left for them to enter. The key didn't work. The car was gone. Their credit cards were declined. I watched from across the street, standing beside Greg's SUV. He handed me a coffee. Lisa banged on the door. I let her. Her voice rose in disbelief. Tom, open the door. This isn't funny." Her lover, the smug idiot from earlier, tried to look tough. "Yo, open up, man. We're not here to fight." I sipped the coffee slowly. Then I turned to Greg and said, "Let's go." As the car pulled away, I looked back one last time. Lisa had collapsed on the porch, crying now, her lover pacing, checking his phone, probably realizing he no longer had anywhere to go either. But I didn't feel pity, not an ounce. This was only the beginning. The betrayal gnawed at me as I sat in the hotel room that night, staring at the ceiling. I couldn't stop picturing the scene, the stranger in my bed, Lisa's face flushed with guilt and shame. How could she do this? After everything we'd been through, after all the sacrifices I'd made for her, how could she throw it all away? But the more I thought about it, the angrier I became. It wasn't just about the cheating, it was about the lies. The way she'd manipulated me, made me believe I was the problem. I remembered the times she'd called me distant, accused me of being too focused on work, too wrapped up in my own world. All the while, she was sneaking around behind my back. I opened my laptop and started digging deeper. I reviewed the bank statements, piecing together the trail of her betrayal. Thousands of dollars spent on hotels, restaurants, gifts, all charged to our joint account. She'd even booked a weekend getaway at a beach resort, using my credit card to pay for it. Then there were the messages. I found screenshots of texts between her and the guy, saved on her cloud account, which I still had access to. Flirty exchanges, plans for secret rendezvous, even jokes about how oblivious I was. One message stood out. "He'll never suspect a thing. He's too busy being Mr. Perfect husband." Reading those words felt like a punch to the gut. But instead of breaking me, they fueled me. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. For so long, I'd been living under the weight of Lisa's expectations, trying to be the perfect husband, working overtime to provide for us, bending over backward to make her happy. And all the while, she was tearing apart everything we had. But now I was free. I met Greg at his office early, armed with the evidence I'd gathered overnight. "We're not just filing for divorce," I told him as I slid the stack of documents across his desk. "We're taking her down." Greg raised an eyebrow, scanning through the bank statements and screenshots. "This is thorough." He looked up at me, impressed but cautious. "You sure you want to go this hard?" "Absolutely," I said without hesitation. She played me for a fool, Greg. She drained our accounts, lied to my face, and humiliated me in our own home. If she thinks she can walk away scot-free, she's got another thing coming. Greg nodded slowly, tapping his pen against the edge of the desk. "All right. Here's what we'll do. First, we filed the divorce petition, citing irreconcilable differences and financial misconduct. Then we hit her with a civil lawsuit for fraud, embezzlement, unauthorized use of funds, the works. With this kind of paper trail, we've got a strong case." "And the house?" I asked. "It stays in your name," he replied confidently. "Since you already transferred ownership before she caught on, there's no legal grounds for her to contest it. Same goes for the business and savings. As far as the law is concerned, they were never hers to begin with." A small smile tugged at the corner of my lips. It felt good knowing that every move I'd made in secret had paid off. Lisa thought she'd been winning, siphoning money and sneaking around, but she underestimated me. Big mistake. By mid-afternoon, the wheels were in motion. The divorce papers were filed, the lawsuit drafted, and copies of both delivered to Lisa via courier, a little surprise waiting for her when she returned from her frantic day of trying to figure out how I'd locked her out of everything. I imagined her face when she opened the envelope, her hands trembling as she realized the magnitude of what I'd done. But I wasn't done yet. That evening, I drove to the beach resort where Lisa had planned her weekend getaway with her lover. The place was luxurious, exactly the kind of spot she chose to flaunt her infidelity. I walked into the lobby, dressed in a tailored suit, and approached the front desk. "I'm here about room 312. I said smoothly, flashing a fake ID I'd picked up earlier that week. "There's been some suspicious activity reported involving one of your guests." The receptionist frowned, typing something into her computer. "Suspicious activity? What sort of?" Before she could finish, I cut her off. "It's part of an ongoing investigation. Let's just say the guest in question has been using stolen credit cards to pay for their stay. I'll need access to their room immediately." She hesitated, clearly uneasy, but eventually handed over a master keycard. People rarely questioned authority, especially when it came wrapped in confidence and a badge. Room 312 was exactly as I expected: expensive champagne chilling in a bucket, designer clothes strewn across the bed, and a pair of shoes still sitting by the door like they'd left in a hurry. I didn't linger long, just snapped a few photos of the setup and slipped out unnoticed. Evidence of her lavish lifestyle, funded by my money, would look great in court. Back at the hotel, I poured myself a drink and leaned back in the chair, replaying the events of the past 24 hours in my mind. Every step I'd taken had been calculated, precise. Lisa thought she could play games with me, but she'd underestimated who I really was beneath the surface. Beneath the quiet, dependable husband she'd dismissed as boring and predictable. My phone buzzed on the table, pulling me out of my thoughts. It was a text from Greg. She lawyered up. "Some high-profile guy named Carter. Word is she's panicking." I smirked, setting the glass down. Good. Let her panic. Let her feel the same helplessness I'd felt standing in that doorway, watching her betray me. This wasn't about revenge, it was about justice. About making sure she understood the consequences of her actions. But deep down, I knew it wasn't just about Lisa anymore. Something inside me had shifted. The man I used to be, the one who bent over backward to please everyone else, was gone. In his place stood someone new. Someone stronger. Someone who refused to let anyone take advantage of him ever again. And as I stared out the window at the city skyline, I couldn't help but wonder. What comes next? The days that followed were a blur of legal motions, tense negotiations, and media speculation. Lisa's lawyer, Carter, was as slick as they came, a silver-tongued shark who specialized in high-profile divorces and scandalous affairs. But even he couldn't spin the mountain of evidence I'd amassed against her. Every document, every photo, every text message painted a damning picture of betrayal and greed. Lisa tried to fight back, of course. She accused me of being controlling, obsessive, even unhinged. "He planned this," she screamed during one particularly heated deposition, tears streaming down her face for the cameras outside the courthouse. "He's punishing me because I left him." But her theatrics only made her look worse. The more she played the victim, the clearer it became that she was desperate to deflect attention from her own actions. And when the judge ordered a forensic audit of our finances, revealing just how much money she'd funneled into secret accounts and lavish gifts for her lover, the tide turned decisively in my favor. The final hearing came on a gray, overcast morning. I sat beside Greg in the courtroom, calm and composed, while Lisa fidgeted nervously across the aisle. Her lover wasn't there. He'd disappeared weeks ago, leaving her to face the fallout alone. For once, she looked small, fragile. Not the confident woman who'd mocked me behind my back or flaunted her affair in our home. When the judge delivered the verdict, it was everything I'd hoped for, and more. Full custody of our assets, including the house, the business, and the savings. A restraining order barring Lisa from contacting me or coming within 500 feet of my property. And perhaps most satisfyingly, an order forcing her to repay every penny she'd stolen, plus interest. As we left the courthouse, reporters swarmed us, shouting questions about the case. Greg ushered me through the crowd, shielding me from the chaos, but I stopped just long enough to address them. One sentence, simple and direct. "This isn't about revenge," I said, meeting their eyes. It's about accountability. Then I turned and walked away, leaving Lisa to deal with the wreckage of her choices. In the weeks that followed, life began to settle into a new rhythm. I moved out of the hotel and into a sleek downtown apartment, far removed from the memories of my old life. The space was modern, minimalist, exactly what I needed to start fresh. I filled it with things that brought me joy: books, art, a state-of-the-art sound system. For the first time in years, I felt like I was living for myself, not for anyone else. Work became my anchor. With Lisa no longer around to criticize or undermine me, I poured all my energy into the business. Profits soared, partnerships flourished, and I found myself reinvigorated by the challenge of building something meaningful. My team noticed the change too. They joked that I seemed lighter, more approachable. And maybe I was. Maybe shedding the weight of a toxic relationship had freed me in ways I hadn't anticipated. Still, there were moments when the silence hit hard. Nights when I'd sit on the balcony, staring at the city lights, wondering if I'd ever let someone close again. Could I trust another person after what Lisa had done? Or would I always carry the scars of her betrayal? It wasn't until a chance encounter at a charity gala that I started to find answers. Her name was Elena, and she was nothing like Lisa. Where Lisa had been calculating and self-centered, Elena was warm, genuine, and fiercely independent. We met by accident. She spilled red wine on my sleeve, then laughed so genuinely at her clumsiness that I couldn't help but laugh along. Over dinner later that night, we talked for hours about everything and nothing: our careers, our passions, the tiny details of life that made us who we were. For the first time in a long time, I felt a spark, not of obsession or desperation, but of possibility. Elena challenged me, intrigued me, made me want to be better. And unlike Lisa, she didn't try to control or manipulate me. She simply accepted me as I was, flaws and all. Months passed, and slowly, I began to rebuild, not just my life, but my faith and love. It wasn't easy. Trust doesn't come quickly after betrayal. But Elena was patient, understanding. She gave me space when I needed it, pushed me gently when I hesitated, and never once made me feel like I owed her anything. One evening, as we stood together on the rooftop of her apartment building, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, she turned to me and asked, "Do you think you'll ever forgive her?" I thought about it for a moment, weighing the question carefully. "I don't know," I admitted finally. "Maybe forgiveness isn't the point. What matters is that I'm moving forward. Building something new. Something real." Elena smiled softly, reaching for my hand. That's all anyone can ask for. And for the first time in a very long time, I believed her. The story ends not with vengeance, but with renewal. With the knowledge that even the deepest wounds can heal, given time and care. That betrayal doesn't define us. It shapes us, forces us to grow stronger, wiser, more resilient. And sometimes, it clears the way for something better. As I looked out at the horizon, holding Elena's hand, I realized I wasn't running anymore. I wasn't hiding, or fighting, or trying to prove anything to anyone. I was simply living. Fully, freely, unapologetically. And that was enough.